Welcome back. You are watching our special broadcast. Donald Trump, who is self-admittedly a fan of tariffs, has in a way upended the world order with a slew of tariff measures over the last few months. How will this United States trade relations with India and the rest of this world? I'm now joined by former Foreign Secretary Shyam Saran. Mr. Saran, what's the impact of reciprocal tariffs on geopolitics?
As far as the geopolitical impact is concerned, I think perhaps this is one aspect which is being neglected in much of the commentary which I see, because essentially what Trump is doing is that he is now suggesting that the organizing principle of interstate relations would in fact be trade. That means, other aspects which determine interstate relations, like maybe ideological affinity or, security relationships, or, a larger sort of sharing of political values. These are not important. That the overriding principle is going to be the trade relationship. That is the foundation. This is a very big change, from the principles on which the world order has been organized so far. So to me, if this is going to be the kind of, shall I say, the standard by which US is going to determine its relationship with other countries, then we are in a completely different kind of a world. And this could therefore mean that countries who are going to be impacted by this are going to be looking for other partnerships, are going to be looking for other ways of, organizing their relationships so that they can deal with a US which is now an outlier in a sense to the global system.
Let me ask you about the Trump announcement. He mentioned India among a group of countries which he said are getting discounted rates, a 27% rate compared to more than 50% for China. Would you say 27% is a discounted rate?
No, I don't think that is a correct interpretation, because essentially what the US has said it has done is to take into account the tariffs which are imposed by the partner country on the US, the average tariff, and secondly, also taking into account what may be domestic measures like non-tariff barriers. He has counted, for example, VAT. In our case, the GST would have been counted in as well. And taking that into account, to actually impose 50% of that, notional tariff. So in India's case, what may have been the calculation that it would have been perhaps on the Indian side, as he has said, 52% was what was imposed by India against US goods. So he is taking about half of that. This is the formula which he has followed apparently with respect to other countries as well.
Right. So there is no exception. There is a formula on the basis of which US has arrived at this. Let me also ask you about...
We may not agree with that formula, but there is some formula and there is no exception made for India. That's what I wanted to make, sir.
Very important, sir. Do you believe, right now we're also seeing statements from the Commerce Ministry saying that they are looking at all options, seeing opportunities for India. They're also talking to the Trump administration. Is there possibility for any reprieve or a temporary pause from these tariffs till the time we sign a bilateral trade agreement? The White House notification says, yes, if President Trump so feels that trade deficit issues are resolved, then these tariffs can be stopped. But do you think India can get a pause earlier?
Well, India did try to get a pause, as you recall, when we said that we are ready to come to some kind of a deal by the autumn of this year, and that any kind of trade measures taken by US should be paused till then. The US declined to do that. So I have seen no evidence that right now, when actually these tariffs have been imposed, that there is any indication from the US that it is likely to give India a reprieve.
All right. Let me also ask you, what do you think has really changed in the India-US relationship going forward, sir? What do you think will be some of the deciding factors? You, of course, mentioned trade, but are there going to be cracks now in the India-US relationship?
Well, trade is certainly a most important component in that relationship. But if I go by, for example, the joint statement which was issued after Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington, then that joint statement actually has a number of very important and significant issues on which the two countries wish to cooperate together, and one of them is defense, both hardware relationship as well as the strategic relationship. There is also, as so far, a continuing commitment, for example, to the quadrilateral, to the Indo-Pacific strategy. We have not seen those components of the relationship negatively impacted. So going forward, I think we should be open to maybe having some setback as far as the trade part is concerned, and move ahead on the categories of relationship, or components rather, of the relationship, where there is a willingness on both sides to move ahead and expand our cooperation. Those opportunities are there. Secondly, even with respect to the current tariffs, you would have noticed that some items, some commodities have been exempted, like, for example, pharmaceuticals. And, pharmaceuticals is a very important, export from India to the United States. Maybe some opportunities might open up there. The second thing you would have noticed is that quite perhaps unexpectedly, the largest tariffs have been imposed on Asian countries. For example, you take Vietnam, which was a bit of a surprise to me, or if you take even smaller countries like Cambodia, or even next door Bangladesh. So the focus has been very much on these Asian countries, and of course, top of the pile is China, with possibly a tariff rate which will come to something like 54% if you take the 20% initially, and now 34% being added to that. Could there be some diversion of trade towards India? Those possibilities are there, but I do not think we should take it as a given. We will still have to work to make sure that our goods are competitive compared to other partners.
Right. Do you feel that these tariffs also bring an opportunity for India? What is also being said by certain market observers, that if Chinese tariffs on China is almost as high as 54%, 37% on other nations, India gets a chance to probably become a bigger exporter to the US, because India's goods will be cheaper compared to other jurisdictions. Do you think that argument makes sense? Are we going to see that happening?
So as I just mentioned, there could be those opportunities, but it is not something which is a given. It still requires India to make efforts to try and expand our market share, to become more competitive. There will be quality issues involved. To merely think that there will be necessarily a trade diversion towards India, I don't think that is a correct assumption. We should focus much more on how we can make our domestic economy more competitive. We should be able to, address some of the very major quality issues that our exports have. There are issues relating to logistics. So, to think that somehow because China has a bigger tariff on its products, therefore necessarily there will be a diversion towards India, I don't think that is a correct assumption to make.
Right. My final question to you would be, sir, do you think it's also high time for certain sectors, such as, take cars, for example? US has been saying that India charges 70% tariffs on imported cars. Apple's 50%, rice and husk 80%. Do you believe that the time has also come for India to drop some of these measures, and we've been protectionist for far too long?
Well, I completely agree that, it is time for India to roll back what we have seen in the last few years of a creeping increase in our tariffs. Actually, since 1991-92 reforms, the general trend in India was towards lower and lower tariffs. It is only in the last 5 or 6 years that we have seen, every budget where we have seen tariffs being increased, and that Make in India somehow also reinforce the idea that perhaps we need to raise tariffs in certain areas. Our experience from the past has been, before 91-92, that we ended up, because of those very high tariffs, we ended up by actually having an Indian economy unable to compete in anywhere in the world. That situation changed after 91-92, precisely because of the liberalized policies that we adopted. I think we should relearn those lessons of the past. And it is high time that we actually open the Indian economy much more, reverse the trend towards higher tariffs. And by the way, if you look at the last budget, there were indications that the government was itself becoming aware of this particular factor, and some changes in the tariff had actually been made. I would hope that this tendency becomes much stronger going forward. Not only because of the US factor, but because in terms of making India really a globally competitive economy.
All right, Ambassador Saran, thank you for joining us on the program. With that, it's a wrap on this special edition of the show. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.